This story is titled, After Our 10-Year Anniversary, I Discovered My Unfaithful Wife Was Planning to Steal My Fortune, Company, and Kids. Everything I had, so I started plotting my revenge. Subreddit. My name is William Carter, and I'm 33 years old. I've been living in Tucson for several years now, and on the surface, my life seems perfect. I have a beautiful wife, Charlotte, and two amazing kids who mean the world to me. Professionally, I've established myself as a successful software architect, making enough money for us to live quite comfortably. Over the years, with Charlotte's invaluable help, I've even built a respected consulting company that's been doing remarkably well. Everything seemed perfect until it all came crashing down. It started with something as innocent as a pair of keys. I was in my office one evening, flipping through paperwork for the business, when I noticed Charlotte's spare car key sitting on my desk. There was nothing unusual about the key itself, but what struck me as odd was the fact that Charlotte hadn't been in my office for weeks. Her usual routine was to toss her keys on the kitchen counter or leave them in the hall. The presence of her car key on my desk felt out of place, causing an uncomfortable feeling to settle in my stomach. Why were they here? It wasn't paranoia, at least not at first. I assumed she'd simply left them there by accident, perhaps while grabbing something else. But the thought stuck with me like a splinter under my skin that I couldn't quite reach. Charlotte was always meticulous about her keys. She even had a special hook for them by the door, something she'd insisted on installing when we first moved in. This deviation from her normal habits didn't add up, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Later that evening, while Charlotte was upstairs bathing the kids, I decided to satisfy my growing curiosity. I grabbed her keys from my desk and walked out to the driveway where her car was parked. My heart was beating slightly faster than normal, though I told myself there was nothing to worry about. My plan was innocent enough. I just wanted to find her sunglasses or perhaps a receipt she might have misplaced. Just something, anything, to put my mind at ease and dismiss the nagging feeling that had been bothering me since finding those keys. Instead, what I found would change everything. Tucked between the passenger seat and center console was an envelope. My hands felt clammy as I slid it out, a sense of dread washing over me before I even knew what was inside. The handwriting on the front stopped me cold. To Charlotte, with love. Inside was a card, not just any card, but one of those cheesy, over-the-top romantic ones with glitter hearts and cursive writing. The kind you'd give to someone you were deeply involved with. The message inside made my chest tighten so severely, I thought I might be having a heart attack. I couldn't even get halfway through before feeling physically sick. I can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore, it read. Every moment with you is worth the wait. Yours forever, Benjamin. Benjamin? Who the hell was Benjamin? I read the message twice, 3 times, desperately trying to force the words into some other meaning. Maybe it was a joke, a prank Charlotte was playing on me. But then, I saw the date. The note had been written just 3 days ago. The same night Charlotte had told me she was working late at the clinic. I could still hear her voice in my head, reassuring me that she'd picked up an extra shift to help out. Another lie in what I was beginning to realize might be a tapestry of deception. With trembling hands, I put everything back exactly as I'd found it, shoved the keys into my pocket, and walked back inside. My mind was racing with questions I wasn't sure I wanted the answers to. Who was Benjamin? How long had this been going on? And how much of my life, my seemingly perfect life, was nothing but a carefully constructed lie? That night, Charlotte came downstairs after putting the kids to bed. Her face was lit up by the soft glow of her phone screen, and she was smiling at whatever she was looking at. She barely noticed me sitting in the corner of the living room, watching her. I don't think I blinked for 5 full minutes as I observed her, this woman I thought I knew so well, now suddenly a stranger to me. "Everything okay?" she asked, finally looking up from her phone. Her tone was casual, but there was something guarded in her eyes that I'd never noticed before, or perhaps had simply chosen to ignore. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "Just a long day at work?" She nodded, and that was the end of it for her. But for me, something fundamental had shifted. The woman standing in front of me wasn't just Charlotte anymore. She was someone I didn't recognize, someone who might be capable of anything, including betraying our 10 years of marriage. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay awake beside her, replaying every moment from the past few months in my head, trying to piece together what I'd missed. All I could think about was that card, Benjamin's handwriting, and the way Charlotte had smiled at her phone earlier. This wasn't going to end well. I could feel it in my bones. The next day, I decided to play it cool. No accusations, no confrontations, at least not yet. I needed more than a glittery card before I brought the house down around us. But inside, I was boiling with a mixture of rage and heartbreak that threatened to spill over at any moment. Every glance at Charlotte felt like staring at a stranger. Every word out of her mouth felt rehearsed, calculated, as if she were an actress playing the role of my loving wife. By mid-morning, I was at the office trying to focus on the mountain of work piling up on my desk. But all I could think about was Benjamin. Who was he? A coworker from the clinic? Some random fling she'd picked up? My thoughts were interrupted by my phone buzzing on the desk. It was Charlotte. I hesitated before answering, steadying my voice to hide the storm of emotions raging inside me. "Hey, what's up?" I managed, sounding surprisingly normal. Her tone was cheerful, almost too cheerful. "Hey babe, can you do me a huge favor and pick up some milk on your way home? I completely forgot this morning, and the kids want cereal for dinner." "Sure," I said, keeping my voice even. "Anything else?" "Nope, love you," she replied, the words sliding off her tongue with practiced ease. The words felt hollow, like an echo of a script she'd been following for years. I hung up and stared at the screen, a new realization dawning on me. Something about the call didn't sit right. Then it hit me. She didn't need to call me for milk. We had an app where we shared our grocery list, and Charlotte updated it religiously. It was practically her religion, ensuring we never forgot anything at the store. Charlotte asking me directly was completely out of character, almost like she wanted to hear my voice, to make sure I was where I said I'd be. I put my phone down and leaned back in my chair, my mind racing again. Was she testing me? Making sure I wasn't catching on to whatever game she was playing? I needed to get ahead of this situation before it spiraled completely out of control. At lunch, I took a detour and drove by the clinic where Charlotte worked. Her car was parked in its usual spot, which should have been reassuring. But as I sat in the lot, something caught my eye. A man standing at the side entrance, talking on his phone. He was tall with dark hair and a polished look about him, wearing a crisp shirt that practically screamed, "Too much cologne." I don't know why I stayed, watching him from the safety of my car, but something about him made my stomach churn. He wasn't dressed like a patient. He looked too comfortable, too familiar with his surroundings. And then I saw Charlotte. She came out the side door, her smile whiter and more radiant than I'd seen in months. She handed him something, a coffee cup maybe, and their fingers brushed against each other during the exchange. It was quick, but not quick enough for me to miss it. He leaned in, said something that made her laugh, and for a moment, I thought he might kiss her right there in the parking lot. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The physical pain a welcome distraction from the emotional turmoil I was experiencing. This had to be Benjamin. It had to be, but I didn't confront her. Not yet. Not here. I needed more evidence. More proof so undeniable that even Charlotte's silver tongue couldn't spin her way out of it. I drove back to the office, my mind swirling with images of Charlotte and this man, this Benjamin, together. When I walked in, one of my employees, Tyler, immediately noticed something was wrong. "You good, boss?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "Fine," I muttered, brushing past him toward my office. But inside, I was anything but fine. I was a man watching his world crumble around him, powerless to stop it. By the time I got home that evening, Charlotte was in full mom mode, helping the kids with homework, talking about their day, and preparing dinner as if nothing was wrong. She was so convincing, so normal in her interactions that if I hadn't seen her with Benjamin just hours earlier, I might have believed it all. But now, everything she did felt like a performance, a carefully rehearsed act designed to keep me in the dark. I went upstairs, ostensibly to shower and change out of my work clothes. Instead, I locked myself in our bedroom and opened her laptop. I knew it was an invasion of privacy, but at this point, I needed answers more than I needed to respect boundaries she had already shattered. Charlotte was careful. Her emails were clean, her browsing history pristine, and regularly deleted. But then I found a folder buried in the depths of her cloud storage. It was innocuously titled Work Notes, the kind of label designed to discourage curiosity. But inside were screenshots of text from Benjamin. "Can't wait to see you again, gorgeous," one read. "I dream about those nights together," said another. The one that hit me hardest. "I hate lying, but it's worth it to have you in my arms." I closed the laptop and sat there on the edge of our bed, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I'd been right all along. This wasn't just a casual fling or Charlotte going through some midlife crisis. She was leading a double life right under my nose, and I wasn't about to let her get away with it. That night, I couldn't hold it in anymore. The rage was bubbling under my skin like a volcano ready to erupt. I decided to push Charlotte. Not a full confrontation yet, but enough to see how she'd react under pressure. I needed to know just how deep her betrayal ran and how skilled she was at maintaining her facade. Dinner was quiet, too quiet. The kids were talking about school, their voices a blur in the background as I watched Charlotte, dissecting every move she made. She was too composed, too casual, like a performer on stage hitting all her marks with practiced precision. After the kids went to bed, I cornered her in the kitchen as she loaded the dishwasher. "So," I started, leaning against the counter with forced nonchalance, "how's work been?" She barely looked up from the dishes. "Same as always, busy," I nodded, pretending to be casual. "You guys seem to be putting in a lot of overtime these days. Everything okay at the clinic?" Her hands paused for the briefest moment before she resumed loading a plate, a hesitation so slight anyone else might have missed it. "Yeah, short-staffed as usual. Why do you ask?" "Just curious," I shrugged, walking over to the fridge and grabbing a beer. "Oh, by the way, I swung by the clinic during lunch today. Thought I'd surprise you." Her head shot up so fast I thought she might get whiplash. "What? Why?" The alarm in her voice was poorly concealed. I took a slow sip of beer, watching her carefully over the bottle. "Had some time to kill. Thought we could grab lunch together. But you were busy." Her face shifted, her smile faltering for a split second before she plastered it back on. "Oh yeah, sorry about that. I had back-to-back patients. You should have texted me." "Next time," I said, keeping my tone light. But inside, my suspicions were confirmed. She was lying, and based on that momentary panic in her eyes, she knew that I knew, or at least suspected. For a moment, we just stood there staring at each other. It was a silent standoff, and I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out how much I knew, how much I had seen. Finally, she broke the tension. "Listen," she said, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow to my ears. "If you want to surprise me, maybe call ahead next time. Work's been so crazy, and I hate when you waste your lunch break like that." Her words sounded reasonable, even sweet, the concerned wife looking out for her husband. But I wasn't buying it anymore. Not a single word. "Good idea," I said, draining the beer and setting the bottle on the counter with a little more force than necessary. "Wouldn't want to catch you off guard." Her eyes flickered just for a second before she turned back to the sink, suddenly very focused on a pot that probably didn't need that much scrubbing. I left the kitchen, my heart pounding with a mixture of anger and adrenaline. She was good at this. I had to give her that. If I hadn't found Benjamin's texts, if I hadn't seen them together, I might have believed her smooth explanations and concerned looks. But now I was certain of two things. Charlotte was a practiced liar, and she was hiding something that could destroy our family. That night, while she slept beside me, seemingly peaceful and unburdened by guilt, I made a decision. Enough sneaking around and piecing together clues. It was time to take this to the next level. The time for subtle probing was over. The next morning, while Charlotte was in the shower, I grabbed her phone from the nightstand. She had a lock code on it, but I'd seen her punch it in hundreds of times over the years. I held my breath as I tapped it in. 1124, our wedding anniversary. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me as the home screen lit up and I was in. What I found made my blood run cold. There were messages from Benjamin, just as I'd expected. But what I didn't expect were the photos. Selfies of them together in a car, her head resting comfortably on his shoulder as if it belonged there. A picture of her laughing in what looked like a hotel room, the bed sheets visible in the background. And then there was the worst one. Charlotte in a dress I didn't recognize, sitting across from Benjamin at a candlelit table, holding his hand. The caption under it read, "My happy place." My hand shook as I stared at the screen, those 3 words burning into my retinas. My happy place. After 10 years of marriage, 2 kids, and everything we'd built together, this was what she called her happy place? Not our home, not our family, but a secret rendezvous with another man. I almost woke her up right then and there, ready to unleash the fury building inside me. But I stopped myself, taking a deep breath to regain control. No, this wasn't the time. Not yet. I needed to be strategic, not emotional. I methodically copied every message, every photo, and emailed them to myself, creating a digital trail of her betrayal. Then I locked her phone and put it back on the nightstand, just as she stepped out of the bathroom, her hair wrapped in a towel, looking refreshed and content. "Morning," she said with a smile, as if nothing was wrong, as if she wasn't living a double life. "Morning," I replied, matching her tone while swallowing the bile rising in my throat. Inside, I was already planning my next move. If Charlotte wanted to play games, she had just met her match. By the time I got to the office that morning, I was running on pure adrenaline. The photos, the messages, it was all I could think about. Every smile Charlotte had ever given me now felt like a joke, a lie wrapped in sweetness and served with a side of deception. But I wasn't just going to sit back and stew in my anger. If she wanted a war, I was going to be fully armed for battle. I started by calling a lawyer. Not to file for divorce yet, but to understand my options. 10 years of marriage, 2 kids, and a business Charlotte had helped me grow meant this wouldn't be a simple separation of assets. The lawyer, an older man named George, didn't mince words. "If she's cheating, you need evidence. Hard evidence," he said firmly. "Courts don't care about suspicions or feelings. They care about proof. Proof! I already had some. Those photos, those texts, but I needed more. Something undeniable. Something that would leave Charlotte with no leverage when the time came to divide our lives." That afternoon, I hired a private investigator. His name was Greg, a grizzled guy who looked like he'd been in this business longer than I'd been alive. He didn't waste time with pleasantries or reassurances. "Give me the basics," he said, jotting notes in a battered notebook that had probably seen its fair share of shattered marriages. I told him everything: the card, the messages, the hotel room photo. He nodded, unfazed by a story he'd likely heard in 100 different variations. "You're dealing with someone who's bold," he observed. "People like her get sloppy when they feel comfortable. I'll find what you need." The plan was simple. Greg would follow Charlotte for the next few days, track her movements, and dig into Benjamin's background. Meanwhile, I would play the loving husband, keeping things as normal as possible at home to avoid tipping Charlotte off. It wasn't easy. That evening, when Charlotte kissed me hello and asked about my day, I had to fight the urge to pull her into the kitchen and confront her with the photos. Instead, I smiled, cooked dinner, and helped the kids with their homework like nothing was wrong, like my world wasn't crumbling around me. Later, after the kids were in bed, Charlotte curled up on the couch with a glass of wine. She looked so at ease, so comfortable in her deception. It made me sick to my stomach. I sat across from her, pretending to scroll through my phone while actually watching her every movement. "So, any plans this weekend?" I asked casually. She shrugged, taking a sip of her wine. "Not really." "Why? Do you have something in mind?" "I thought we could do something as a family," I said, watching her face closely for any reaction. Her eyes flickered for a split second, a brief tell that most people would miss, and then she smiled. "That sounds nice. Let me check my schedule tomorrow." Check her schedule? She worked weekdays, not weekends. What could she possibly have to check? I knew exactly what, or rather who, she needed to check with. Benjamin. The next day, Greg called me with an update. "She's careful, but not careful enough," he said. "She met a guy at a coffee shop this morning. They sat in a corner booth, real cozy, holding hands. Benjamin, most likely." My grip on the phone tightened as Greg continued. "I followed him after he left. He works in real estate. Married, no kids. That last part hit me like a punch to the gut. Married. Benjamin was just as much of a liar as Charlotte. 2 cheaters finding comfort in each other's dishonesty." Greg continued with his report. "She went back to the clinic after their meeting, but I've got enough to tie them together. Want me to keep digging?" "Absolutely," I said without hesitation. "I need everything." That evening, I started putting together a file, photos, texts, timelines. I wanted it all in one place, a bomb ready to detonate when the time was right. But even as I prepared for the confrontation, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about catching Charlotte anymore. This was about taking control, about making sure she didn't walk away with my kids, my business, and everything I'd worked for. Charlotte thought she had the upper hand in whatever game she was playing. She had no idea what was coming. 2 days later, Charlotte made her first mistake. It was a Saturday morning, and I was in the garage pretending to organize tools while actually watching the driveway through the side window. Charlotte had mentioned earlier that she was meeting her friend Lily for brunch. Normally, I wouldn't have given it a second thought, but now every word she said felt like a breadcrumb leading me closer to the full truth. At exactly 10:15 a.m., Charlotte came downstairs dressed to kill. She was wearing a black dress I hadn't seen before, paired with heels that were far too fancy for a casual brunch with a friend. The outfit screamed date, not friendly get-together. Wow, I said, leaning against the kitchen counter as she grabbed her purse. Brunch with Lily must be pretty upscale these days. She smirked and waved me off dismissively. She wanted to check out that new place downtown. You know how she is. I nodded, watching her carefully as she applied a final touch of lipstick. Text me if you need me to pick you up. You're going to have mimosas, right? I offered, my tone deliberately light. She laughed, slipping her phone into her bag. I'll be fine, don't wait up. As soon as the door closed behind her, I grabbed my phone and texted Greg. She just left, black dress, heading downtown. This wasn't a brunch with Lily. This was Charlotte on her way to Benjamin. Greg responded almost immediately. Got it, I'm already nearby. Now all I had to do was wait, my stomach churning with a mixture of anticipation and dread. 2 hours later, I got a call from Greg. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. They're at a hotel, he said, his voice matter-of-fact. My heart dropped into my stomach like a stone. What? I managed to choke out even though I'd suspected as much. They had brunch at a cafe first. Cozy like last time, Greg explained. Then they walked across the street to the Marriott. I tailed them inside. They went straight to the elevators. I gripped the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white, an overwhelming urge to punch something, anything, washing over me. Room number? I asked, my voice tight with barely controlled rage. I'm working on it, Greg said. But I got photos of them holding hands in the lobby. You've got enough to blow this wide open if you want. No, I said through gritted teeth. This wasn't just about exposing her infidelity anymore. This was about winning the war that was coming. Keep digging. I need more. Your call, he said. I'll stay here as long as I can. I hung up and paced the kitchen, my mind racing with images I didn't want to see. Charlotte and Benjamin together in that hotel room. This wasn't just some emotional affair or a fleeting indiscretion. Charlotte and Benjamin were fully committed to their betrayal, going all the way right under my nose. An hour later, Greg texted again. Room 426. Checked in under his name. They've been up there for 45 minutes. I stared at the message, my chest tight with a rage so intense it was hard to breathe. I could drive there right now, storm into that hotel, and end the charade in one explosive moment. But the rational part of my brain, the part not consumed by hurt and anger, knew that wouldn't get me what I needed. Charlotte would spin it, twist it, make herself the victim somehow. I couldn't let that happen. Instead, I called George, my lawyer. I have confirmation, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. They're at a hotel right now. He didn't sound surprised. Good, don't confront her yet, he advised. Let your PI gather everything. The more evidence we have, the cleaner this will go when we file. When we file, I repeated, the word divorce hanging unspoken between us, tasting bitter on my tongue. George's voice softened slightly, showing a rare glimpse of the man behind the professional facade. I know it's hard, but you're doing the right thing. Just keep playing the part for now. The longer she thinks she's in the clear, the more reckless she'll get. I hung up and stared at the wall, my emotions a tangled mess of fury, betrayal, and heartbreak. The life I thought I had was gone, replaced by something ugly and false. By the time Charlotte came home that afternoon, I had plastered a smile on my face, the same mask I'd been wearing for days. She walked in with casual confidence, carrying a small shopping bag as if she'd spent the day browsing boutiques instead of lying in another man's arms. How was brunch? I asked, keeping my tone light, my face a blank canvas. Great, she said, setting the bag on the counter with a practiced nonchalance. Lily loved the new place. We should go sometime. I forced a chuckle, the sound hollow in my ears. Sounds good. She kissed me on the cheek and headed upstairs to rest, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the truth I now held like a loaded weapon. She thought she'd gotten away with it, slipping back into our life without a ripple. But she was wrong. This wasn't her game anymore. This was mine now, and she was about to lose everything. The next morning, I woke up before Charlotte, my mind already racing. I'd barely slept, replaying everything I knew over and over again. Her lies, Benjamin, the hotel room, it all painted a picture I couldn't unsee, no matter how much a part of me wished I could go back to blissful ignorance. Charlotte spent the morning in her usual routine, acting like nothing was wrong. She played with the kids, laughed at breakfast, and even kissed me on the cheek before heading upstairs to do laundry. Watching her felt like watching a stranger, someone who had mastered the art of deceit so completely that it had become second nature. By mid-afternoon, I got the call I'd been waiting for. Greg's voice on the other end was sharp and direct. I've got everything. Photos, timestamps, even security footage from the hotel lobby. Send it all, I said, my voice cold and resolute. Minutes later, my email dinged with an incoming message. I opened the attached files and stared at the evidence. Each photo, another nail in the coffin of our marriage. There was Charlotte holding Benjamin's hand, their fingers intertwined with an intimacy that made my stomach turn. Charlotte leaning into him, her eyes glowing in a way I hadn't seen in years. Certainly not when she looked at me. Charlotte walking into the elevator with him, her body language screaming intimacy and desire. I forwarded everything to George with a single line. "Do what you need to do." George responded almost immediately. "This is ironclad. Meet me tomorrow to finalize paperwork." The rest of the day passed in a haze of barely contained emotion. I kept up appearances, playing the part of the unsuspecting husband, while inside I was seething with every fake smile, every casual touch. Each time Charlotte smiled at me or laughed with the kids, it felt like a slap in the face, a reminder of how easily she could switch between her two lives. That evening, after the kids were in bed, I decided to test the waters one more time. "Hey," I said casually as Charlotte curled up on the couch with her tablet. "Have you talked to Lily today?" Her head shot up, her expression instantly guarded. "Why?" "Just wondering. You seemed to have such a good time yesterday. Thought you might have made plans to see her again." She relaxed, her smile returning with practiced ease. "No, not today. She's busy with her sister's baby shower stuff." I nodded, pretending to believe her. But her answer was too perfect, too rehearsed. She'd had this explanation ready, anticipating any questions about her supposed day with Lily. "You know," I continued, deliberately keeping my tone conversational, "it's funny. I ran into her husband at the hardware store this morning. He didn't mention anything about a baby shower." Her face froze for the briefest moment before she forced a laugh. "Oh, maybe it's next weekend. I'm not sure of the exact date." She was scrambling, and I could see it clearly now. The cracks in her facade were starting to show, and a small, vengeful part of me enjoyed watching her squirm. It was the least she deserved after everything she'd done. The moment she went upstairs, I grabbed her tablet and entered the same passcode as her phone. It unlocked, and within seconds I found what I was looking for: an email thread with Benjamin. The subject line read, "This weekend," and Benjamin's last message was simple: "Rooms booked. Can't wait to see you again." I stared at the screen, the words blurring as my vision reddened with renewed anger. This wasn't just a mistake or a one-time lapse in judgment. Charlotte had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. Her deception was thorough and deliberate. I took a screenshot and added it to the growing file of evidence in my email, then put the tablet back exactly where I found it. My hands were shaking with a mix of rage and resolve. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about survival, mine and the kids. I needed to protect what was left of our family from Charlotte's selfish choices. When Charlotte came back downstairs, her smile was easy and carefree, completely unaware that I'd just uncovered yet another layer of her lies. "You look tired," she said, settling next to me on the couch as if she had any right to be concerned about my well-being. "I am," I said, forcing a yawn. "Long day at work." She kissed my cheek, her lips warm and soft against my skin. But it felt like poison now. Every affectionate gesture tainted by what I knew. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through the steps I needed to take. Charlotte thought she had me fooled, thought she could keep spinning her web of lies while I remained oblivious. But she was wrong, and tomorrow, everything would change. The next morning, I woke with a strange sense of clarity. For the first time in days, my mind wasn't a chaotic swirl of rage and betrayal. Instead, it was focused, sharp, like the calm that settles over a battlefield just before the first shot is fired. Today was the day I would start dismantling the illusion Charlotte had built. I dropped the kids off at school, taking an extra moment to kiss them on the head and tell them I loved them. The thought of them being caught in the fallout of what was coming made my chest ache with a pain that was almost physical. But I couldn't let Charlotte's lies infect their lives any longer. This was about protecting them, even if it meant ripping everything else apart. After the drop-off, I drove straight to George's office. He had the paperwork ready, spread out across his desk like a damning mosaic of our failed marriage. "You've got enough to not only file for divorce, but also to gain the upper hand in custody," he said, his experienced eyes scanning the evidence I'd gathered. "These photos, the messages, the hotel visits, it's undeniable. Judges don't look kindly on infidelity, especially when it involves sneaking around during family time." "What about the business?" I asked, my voice steely with determination. The company I'd built was my life's work, and Charlotte had helped me grow it. I wasn't about to let her walk away with half of that too. That's trickier, George admitted, leaning back in his chair. She could claim a share since she's been part of your life while you built it, even if she didn't contribute directly. But with the right strategy and this evidence, we can minimize her claims. She's not going to walk away with your company. I nodded, my jaw tight with resolve. File the papers, I want this done. George handed me a pen, and I signed the divorce documents with a steady hand that surprised even me. There was no hesitation, no doubt, just the absolute certainty that this was the right thing to do. Now, he said, leaning back in his chair, how do you want to handle the confrontation? Public? Private? Subtle? Or do you want to make it hurt? The question lingered in the air between us. I thought about Charlotte sitting at home, probably texting Benjamin under the guise of folding laundry or some other mundane task. I thought about her smile, her laugh, the way she kissed me like nothing was wrong when her lips had been on another man just hours before. Private, I said finally, after careful consideration. But I'm not pulling punches. George nodded, understanding the weight behind my decision. Fair enough. When do you want to do it? Tonight. I spent the rest of the day preparing, going through the motions of normal life while mentally rehearsing what I would say, how I would present the evidence. I went home, worked in my office, and pretended everything was normal when the kids returned from school. Charlotte was her usual self, flitting around the house, texting on her phone with a small smile playing on her lips, and chatting with the kids about their day. The normalcy of it all only fueled my determination. Do you need anything from the store? She asked as she walked past my office door, barely pausing. No, I'm good, I said without looking up from my computer. I could feel her hovering for a moment before she moved on. That hesitation. It was like she could sense the shift in the air, but couldn't quite place it. The predator was about to become the prey, and some primal instinct was warning her. By dinner, my plan was locked in place. I played along through the meal, asking the kids about school, laughing at their jokes, and pretending that everything was fine. Charlotte joined in, her laughter hollow to my ears now that I could recognize the artifice in it. After the kids were in bed, I poured us each a glass of wine and sat down at the kitchen table. The moment had arrived. We need to talk, I said, my voice calm but firm. Charlotte raised an eyebrow, her glass halfway to her lips. About what? About you, I said, setting my phone on the table between us, the screen dark but loaded with the ammunition I needed. She froze, her eyes flicking to the phone and then back to me. What's going on? I took a deliberate sip of wine, savoring the brief pause before the storm. I think you know. Her face faltered for the briefest second before she regained her composure, the mask slipping back into place. I have no idea what you're talking about. Benjamin, I said, the name hitting the air between us like a thunderclap. Her hand trembled slightly as she set the wineglass down. Who's Benjamin? I unlocked my phone and opened the photos Greg had sent me. One by one, I slid them across the table toward her, watching her face as she looked at each damning image. The hotel lobby, the elevator, the texts, the hotel room door. Her face turned pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water as the reality of her situation dawned on her. This isn't what it looks like, she stammered, her voice small and uncertain. Oh? I leaned back, crossing my arms. So you're not sneaking off to hotels with a married man? You're not lying to me, to the kids, about where you've been? She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating with the weight of her betrayal. I trusted you, I said, my voice rising as the dam of my controlled emotions began to crack. I built a life with you, gave you everything, and this is how you repay me? By playing house with some guy named Benjamin? Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care anymore. They weren't tears of genuine remorse. They were the tears of someone who had been caught, someone who was sorry not for what they'd done, but for the consequences they now faced. I can explain, she said weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. Explain what? That you've been cheating? That you've been lying to me for God knows how long? My voice was hard, unforgiving. Go ahead, Charlotte. I'm all ears. Her face crumpled, and the tears started flowing freely down her cheeks. But they weren't the tears of someone who regretted what they'd done. They were the tears of someone trapped by their own deception. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. Sorry? I said, standing up, unable to remain seated in the face of such a hollow apology. You don't even know what that word means. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you got caught. She didn't argue, didn't try to defend herself. She just sat there sobbing into her hands as I stared down at her, my anger burning brighter than her crocodile tears. "This is over," I said finally, my voice cold with finality. "You want Benjamin? Go have him. But you're not taking my kids, my business, or my life with you. That ends now." Charlotte looked up at me, her eyes wide and red-rimmed. "What are you saying?" "I've already filed the papers," I said, my tone leaving no room for doubt. "We're done." Her sobs turned to gasps of shock, but I didn't care anymore. The game was over. The lies were exposed, and she had lost. Charlotte sat at the table, stunned. Her face shifted from disbelief to anger in a matter of seconds. The tears stopped as quickly as they'd started, replaced by something cold and calculating that I'd never seen in her before. In that moment, I realized I truly didn't know the woman I'd married. "You filed for divorce?" she hissed, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. "That's right," I said, standing firm, refusing to be intimidated. "It's done. I've had enough of your lies, Charlotte." She scoffed, wiping at her eyes with a dismissive gesture. "You're blowing this out of proportion. It wasn't serious, it was just a stupid mistake." "A mistake?" I barked, slamming my hand on the table with a force that made the wine glasses rattle. "A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill or burning dinner. Sneaking off to hotels with Benjamin isn't a mistake. It's a deliberate choice, and don't even try to downplay it. I've seen the photos. I've seen the messages. Don't insult my intelligence." Her face twisted into something venomous, a side of her I hadn't seen before. The mask was fully off now, revealing the person she'd been hiding beneath the facade of the perfect wife and mother. "You've been spying on me?" she accused, turning the tables with practiced skill. I laughed bitterly, not falling for her obvious attempt to reframe the narrative. "Don't even try to flip this on me. You were the one sneaking around, lying to my face every day. You think I wouldn't notice when my wife of 10 years suddenly had a secret life?" She stood up, crossing her arms defensively. "I was unhappy. You've been so focused on your stupid business that you didn't even notice I was miserable." "Oh, don't you dare!" I shot back, my voice rising with righteous indignation. "I worked my ass off for this family, for you. I was building a future while you were out playing house with Benjamin." Her jaw clenched, and for a moment she didn't say anything. But then her expression shifted, and I knew what was coming. She was about to go for the jugular, to wound me as deeply as she could. "You think you're perfect?" she sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. "You're not. You've been so wrapped up in yourself that you didn't even notice how distant we've been. You're just as much to blame for this as I am." "Blame?" I said, incredulous that she would even attempt such a transparent deflection. "You're blaming me for your affair?" She shrugged, her voice cold and detached. "Maybe if you'd paid more attention, I wouldn't have had to look somewhere else." Her words hit like a punch to the gut, but I didn't let her see it. Instead, I stared her down, my anger boiling over into a calm, deadly rage. "You know what? You can tell yourself whatever lies you need to sleep at night, but this isn't on me. You chose this, Charlotte. You destroyed this marriage, not me." She rolled her eyes, her lips curling into a bitter smile that held no warmth. "Fine. Divorce me then. But don't think for 1 second you're going to walk away with everything. I've been here for 10 years. I've put just as much into this family as you have." I leaned in, my voice low and steady, each word carefully chosen. "You really think you're walking out of this with my business? My kids? Think again. I've got evidence, Charlotte. Judges don't take kindly to cheaters. You want to fight? Bring it on. But I promise you, you won't win." Her confidence faltered for a moment, the reality of her situation clearly sinking in. But she quickly masked it with defiance, unwilling to concede defeat so easily. "We'll see about that." The tension in the room was suffocating, the air thick with unspoken threats and years of resentment that had suddenly bubbled to the surface. Charlotte grabbed her wine glass and stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with the wreckage of what was once our life together. As I stood there staring at the empty table, I realized something important. This wasn't going to be clean or easy. Charlotte wasn't going to go quietly into the night with her tail between her legs. She was gearing up for a fight, preparing to defend her actions and claim what she believed was hers. But so was I, and I had something she didn't: the truth. Charlotte didn't waste any time showing her hand. By the next morning, she'd shifted from denial to full-on attack mode. When I came downstairs, she was already on the phone, her voice sharp and accusatory as she paced the kitchen, one hand on her hip in a pose of righteous indignation. "I can't believe he'd do this," she said, glancing at me as I walked in, her expression venomous. After everything I've sacrificed for him, he's trying to make me look like the bad guy. I poured myself a cup of coffee, deliberately ignoring her performance. If she wanted to play the victim, let her. It didn't matter what lies she spun to her friends or family. I had the truth, and I was ready to use it. After she hung up, she turned to me, her eyes blazing with rehearsed fury. "You think you're so smart, don't you?" I sipped my coffee, keeping my voice calm and refusing to be baited. "I think I'm done putting up with your lies." Her laugh was sharp and bitter, a sound devoid of any real humor. "You don't get to play the martyr here. You're not as perfect as you think." "Neither are you," I said, my tone icy. "But at least I'm not the one sneaking around with someone else's husband." Her face flushed with anger, but before she could respond, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a message from George. "Confirmed she's trying to drain your shared accounts. Freeze them immediately." My stomach clenched with a new wave of anger and betrayal. Of course, Charlotte wouldn't go down quietly. She was going to fight dirty, try to grab whatever she could before the divorce proceedings began in earnest. Without a word, I walked out of the kitchen and into my office, locking the door behind me. I called the bank and froze all our joint accounts. A move I didn't make lightly, but one that Charlotte had forced with her underhanded tactics. By the time I came back out, she was sitting at the dining table, scrolling through her phone with a smug expression that faltered when she saw me. "You'll regret this," she said without looking up, her voice laden with thinly veiled threats. "Maybe," I said, leaning against the doorway, unintimidated. "But not as much as you'll regret underestimating me." The rest of the day was a tense standoff. Charlotte barely spoke to me, and when she did, her words were laced with venom, each syllable dripping with resentment. I could feel her plotting, her mind working overtime to figure out her next move in this new war between us. That evening, after the kids were asleep, she dropped her next bombshell, a calculated attempt to regain the upper hand. "I've spoken to a lawyer," she said, her tone dripping with false confidence as she stood in the doorway of the living room where I was sitting. "Good," I said, not missing a beat, refusing to give her the reaction she wanted. "You'll need one." Her eyes narrowed, frustration creeping into her expression at my lack of concern. "Don't think you're going to paint me as the bad guy here. I've done just as much for this family as you have. I deserve my fair share." "Fair share?" I said, raising an eyebrow, allowing a hint of disbelief to color my voice. "Is that what Benjamin told you? That you'd get half of everything and ride off into the sunset?" Her jaw clenched, and I knew I'd hit a nerve. Maybe that had been the plan all along, to leave me once she'd secured her financial future. "You're delusional," she snapped, her carefully constructed composure cracking around the edges. "The judge is going to see right through you." I stepped closer, lowering my voice to ensure my words had maximum impact. "The judge is going to see exactly who you are, Charlotte. I've got photos, messages, hotel receipts. You think you can spin this in your favor? Good luck." For the first time since this confrontation began, I saw real fear flash across her face. It was brief, just a momentary glimpse, but it was there. She knew she was cornered, and now it was a question of how far she'd go to claw her way out. "Enjoy your little victory lap," she said, grabbing her wine glass and storming upstairs, her retreat a clear sign that she knew she'd lost this round. It won't last. As I watched her go, I felt a strange mix of emotions wash over me. Anger, sadness, and a grim sense of satisfaction that I'd finally called her bluff. Charlotte thought she could manipulate her way out of this like she manipulated everything else in her life. But she'd underestimated me, failing to recognize that this wasn't just a divorce anymore. It was a battle for everything I held dear, and I wasn't going to lose. The next day, Charlotte escalated her war to a level I hadn't anticipated. I'd expected resistance, maybe some emotional manipulation or financial maneuvering. But I wasn't prepared for how far she'd go. I got a call from Greg around noon while I was in my office, trying to focus on work instead of the shambles of my personal life. His voice was calm, but had an edge that made me sit up straight, immediately alert. "You're not going to like this," he said without preamble. "What is it?" I asked, bracing myself for whatever new development he'd uncovered. "She met with Benjamin again this morning, but they weren't alone," Greg said, his professional tone doing little to soften the blow of his next words. "She brought your kids." My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. "What?" I managed, a cold fury spreading through my chest. "She took them to a cafe downtown. Benjamin was there, acting like they're one big happy family," Greg explained, his disgust evident even through his professional demeanor. "He bought them muffins, joked around with them. It looked like he was trying to charm them." I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My kids? She'd involved my kids in this mess, parading them in front of Benjamin like it was normal, like he was going to be their new stepfather. The thought made me physically ill. "Did you get photos?" I asked, my voice tight with barely contained rage. "Of course," Greg said, his tone reassuring. "I'll send them over, but you need to act fast. She's not just trying to hurt you anymore. She's trying to turn this into a new life with him." As soon as I hung up, the photos came through to my email. There they were, my children, sitting at a table with Benjamin, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. And Charlotte? She looked relaxed, happy even, as if she wasn't tearing apart our family but simply introducing them to a new friend. I slammed my fist onto the desk, the pain a welcome distraction from the emotional turmoil raging inside me. This wasn't just about us anymore. She was dragging the kids into her delusional fantasy, using them as pawns in her selfish game, and I couldn't let it happen. I called George immediately, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and concern. "She's involving the kids now. She took them to meet Benjamin." There was a pause on the other end as George absorbed this new information. "That's good for us," he said finally, his voice measured and strategic. "Judges take parental behavior into account. This will show she's prioritizing her affair over her children's well-being." "Good for us?" I snapped, unable to contain my frustration. "What about the kids? They're confused, and she's using them like props." "I understand," George said calmly, his voice a steadying influence. "We'll address that in court, but for now, you need to keep documenting everything. Don't confront her until we have a hearing date." I hung up, my stomach churning with conflicting emotions. Playing the long game might have been the smart move legally, but emotionally, it felt like torture to watch Charlotte manipulate our children while I stood by, gathering evidence. That evening, when Charlotte came home with the kids, she acted like nothing had happened. She laughed with them, helped them with their homework, and even had the audacity to ask me how my day had been, as if we were still a normal, functioning family. "Busy," I said, keeping my voice neutral despite the anger simmering just below the surface. "Tell me about it," she said with a smile. These two were a handful today. My blood boiled at her audacity, at how easily she could compartmentalize her betrayal. "I'm sure Benjamin helped you manage," I said, my tone sharper than I intended, the name slipping out before I could stop myself. Her face froze for a split second before she recovered, plastering on a nervous laugh. "Benjamin? What are you talking about?" I stood up from the table, glaring at her, no longer able to maintain the charade. "Don't lie to me, Charlotte. I know you took the kids to meet him." The kids looked up, confusion written across their innocent faces. They didn't deserve to be caught in the crossfire of our adult problems. Charlotte shot me a warning glare. "Can we not do this in front of them?" she hissed, clearly uncomfortable with being called out in front of the children. I clenched my fists and forced myself to take a deep breath. As much as I wanted to confront her, to make her admit what she'd done, the kids didn't need to witness this ugly side of adult relationships. "Fine, but we're talking later." After the kids were in bed, I cornered her in the living room, no longer willing to hold back my anger. "What the hell were you thinking?" I demanded. "Taking our kids to meet him? What kind of mother does that?" She folded her arms, her face defiant, unapologetic. "They're my kids too, and I'll introduce them to whoever I want." "Like hell you will," I said, my voice rising as I struggled to maintain control. "You're not dragging them into your mess. They don't need to meet your fling, Charlotte. They don't deserve to be part of your lies." Her eyes narrowed, and she went straight for what she knew would hurt me most. "You're just jealous because they liked him. They had fun. Something they don't have when you're around." The words hit me like a slap, but I didn't let her see the hurt. This wasn't about me, and I wouldn't let her make it about me. This isn't about me, and you know it. This is about you crossing a line. If you keep involving the kids in your fantasy life with Benjamin, I'll make sure you regret it. She smirked, the look on her face both infuriating and chilling in its confidence. Good luck with that. I stepped closer, my voice low and deadly serious. "I don't need luck. I've got proof. Keep pushing me, Charlotte. See how far you get." She stared at me for a long moment, the defiance in her eyes flickering just slightly as she registered the threat in my words. Then she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, fists clenched, heart pounding with a renewed determination. She thought this was a game she could win by using my children as pawns. But she had just made the biggest mistake of all, involving my kids in her selfish schemes. And I wasn't going to let that slide. The line had been crossed, and there was no turning back now.